YouTube. In this video, we are going to discuss one of the ways that you can go ahead and plot your novel. I like to refer to this as a lore Bible, so I usually write that at the top of my document, which is in a Word document for me, so that I can have everything in one place. You can also use a journal or loose leaf paper, whatever works for you. But I usually like to work online because then I can just add more pages to the appropriate section of this document. So the first thing I do when I plot my novel, and this might depend if you already have your characters or if you already have a plot but no characters. So usually I like to work writing down the list of characters that I might have in the story. And if they don't have a name, then I can just put, main character, male or female. And then it could be like, oh, the mentor, or it can be the antagonist. So it really depends on if you have your names already or just, the role that they have. Another section you can include in the lore Bible is character details, and this will help you remember if the character has freckles or, blue hair or how short they are or whatever the case may be. So that way, if your character has green eyes on page 10, they're going to keep having green eyes throughout the whole series. So that's just something, just to write down as a reminder. If I have the list of characters, then I put the role next to them. That way I don't have separate document. That's one way to keep it organized. So even if you write in a character that didn't exist before or they're important, then you can put, oh, there's Thomas and he's a cook, and you can add some information about this new character that suddenly pops up in a story. Personally, I don't always have all the characters that I'm going to use. Sometimes I add new characters depending on the scene, or take them out depending if I'm editing or if I need them to be in the story. So it really depends on what you feel comfortable, and I don't really allow myself to be only focus on what I have. So if I need to change something, then I allow myself to write those changes. So the next section that I usually have in my lore Bible is what the characters want. So, for example, if my main character wants to be like the best fighter, right? I would just write that down, and it can be like a vague idea, but it gives me a starting point. And all the characters, they want something, they want to accomplish something, and it could be just like, oh, they want to earn enough money to support their family, right? And so just to keep the story dynamic and the world dynamic, that means everyone wants something, but maybe someone is in their way, and that creates conflict and tension between characters. So that's a good point to start. Another section I like to add to the lore Bible is character obstacles. So I know what they want. So if Alice's dream is to become the best fighter, then I need to make sure that there's obstacles that she needs to overcome to get that goal. And maybe she won't reach that goal, she can fail at it, but there's going to be some change in her, that reflects all her hard work. And so I would put, okay, so the obstacle is, you need to be able to like ride a horse or whatever. And so then it's like Alice then needs to do these steps in order to ride that horse, in order to be able to accomplish that goal at the end. So the obstacles are like things that she needs to overcome. And I think as a writer, it helps me to know that, because then I know where to go. I'm not just stopping and thinking. Basically, I'm like just doing all the thinking as much as I can now before I start writing, so that way I have an easier time to write the story as opposed to trying to figure everything out. It's not bad to figure everything out later. So if I don't know something, that I'm not gonna, just sit and think and do nothing. When that comes up, then maybe I have a better idea. Maybe I think about it, later that day. Leeway is fine. Different writers write differently and plan differently, but this is what works for me. Now, the story with Alice, I have a vague idea of the plot and I have a vague idea of the characters, but I have a starting point. Even if my document doesn't have that many characters or that many plot points, at least it's a starting point. and I can always just come back to it, in a day, or just, keep thinking about it or talking to someone about what may work, and just, getting different ideas and putting them together. So that way I feel like I'm working on developing the world, even though I'm not writing anything. It's still, I'm very much still thinking about it. Other sections that I like to have or include in my lore Bible would be locations, like where I'm not just talking about setting, but if you mention a town, then make sure you write the town down, so that way in book 3, you have the correct name for the location, right? Consistency. As for history, it could be, about the world, about the history and the location, what readers need to know, what you need to know, government as well. This one is kind of like, I feel like I don't always go too much into it, whether it's a monarch or, republic or whatever it may be. But, I'd be like, okay, in this country, they have this type of government. This is how they make their laws, just something basic, depending on the genre of your story and how much you need to include that in your world. Because sometimes, depending on the genre, I feel like you may or may not omit some details that you thought up of. And of course, lastly, I do have the plot details, which means, what happened in the first act, in the second act, in the third act, and that's like your 3-act structure. But sometimes, there could be multiple things that happen within, the first 5 chapters, or your inciting incident, and then, you got your middle. And with the plot details, I don't always know what's going to happen next, but at least I have an idea, where I write down the idea, even though it's vague, like, oh, I want this to happen, or I want this to not happen. So it really depends on how much you've thought about, like, what the overall theme, or what kind of story you're trying to tell. So for me, the plot details, I just go with the scenes, like, okay, I want this scene to happen. And so then I plot backwards, where it's like, if I want her to win this contest, to be the best fighter, what's going to lead up to it? So with the character wants and obstacles, that kind of helps me know those plot details, because I've done half the work. Overall, the Lore Bible is there to really help you keep track of everything about your world or your novel. Personally, I think with the Lore Bible, it keeps all the information together. So if you forgot the name of the cook, at the palace, you know their name, you know what they look like, and that way it's all, as I mentioned, in one place. And even if, you think of something new, you still write it down. So if you need help, or you're not sure what to do next, I feel like the Lore Bible is a good starting point to refresh your memory. And if I miss anything, feel free to drop it in the comments below. Thanks for watching.